you just want to know, what does he eat to come up with stories like this? Please share with the class, please. Hello, welcome back to my channel. As you can probably tell, I moved into a new apartment. So last month was absolutely chaotic. But here we are. New house, new library, new video. Today I want to talk about a Japanese mystery writer who for some reason still remains, I want to say invisible in the English speaking world. His name is Takekuni Kitayama. I don't know if anyone that speaks English or reads English have read his book. I hope there are some out there. Even though some of his best works that I like the most has not been published in the English market yet, I still want to make a video about him because I think it's such a shame that he's not being introduced to the major English-speaking market yet. If you read contemporary Japanese crime fiction in English in general, you would know all the big names, the most famous works, the ones that have been adapted into TV shows, films, theater works. But his work, I would say, touched a slightly different corner of Japanese mystery fiction. His work is strange, extremely weird, I would say, elegant, delicate, sometimes almost impossible to categorize. I don't want to introduce him as merely, oh, he's another guy that writes about murder and he's from Japan. No, it's part detective story, part fairy tale, part science fiction even, and it was very emotional, which that was to my surprise. And as a reader, it gave me tremendous joy of reading his book. And today, the book I want to talk about is a short story collection of his called The Millennium Library or The Thousand-Year Library. I read this book. This book has 5 short stories or 6. 5, I think 5, yeah. I read this in half a night, like maybe 2-3 hours. Cannot put it down. Absolutely attached to it. It's a collection of different folkloric or mystery or science fiction premise, and the first story starts with a forbidden alley that you cannot cross unless you want to bring someone who's dead back to life. And then it has a village that with different weird looking towers that they send dead bodies to. They buried the dead bodies in the towels. Or a mystery library that people were sent to as sacrifices to guard the library. It sounds really weird, right? That's what I was thinking too. And the book ends with a really strange piano sonata that on the beginning of the music sheet it wrote, do not play this music. I'm just gonna say I was instantly hooked into the story. You got to give it to him. These are not ordinary crime sets. They feel closer to urban legend or myth, nightmares, weird stories you heard when you were a kid. But what makes Kitayama so interesting is that he doesn't leave it as unrealistic myth stories without answers. Of course, his stories often begin with wonder, superstitions, fear, the atmosphere of something terrible is going to happen. But he laid the foundation of the story. He laid everything else with solid deduction, explanation, and a very solid development of the story. It starts as something light and mystery, but it doesn't end there. And the best thing about his work, we all love a plot twist, right? I think that's one of the biggest thrilling experience you can get from reading mystery books. We all love plot twist. All of his books, beneath this beautiful, carefully set up mystery premise, has a overturn at the end of the story with one line, two lines. Or in one of the book with one photo, it can overturn the entire world of the story. In one or two sentences, the story shift from a ordinary urban myth, legend, mystery work into a solid deduction. You think you are reading one kind of story, and then the last revelation quietly changes everything. The whole story, the temperature, even the roles of different characters. I had tremendous fun from reading this book, because some of the stories here, you should read it twice. You should read it as it was, and then after you know the answer at the end of the story, you should go back to read it again, because the second time you read it, everything makes more sense. Everything starts to add up together. And I think that was precisely the fun of reading a good, solid detective story. And that, to me, is Kitayama's charm and his magic. He used mystery murder as a package. The clues, the tricks, the how does it going? There needs to be a case or a puzzle. You have to solve it. Everything to arrive at a feeling. The puzzle is not there to show off, or the puzzle is not just there to be answered. The puzzle is there to reveal the wound, and sometimes the wound and the emotions that came with it are much more touching than just the puzzle. And let's talk about the title story in this book, the Millennium Library, the 1,000-Year Library. There's a village, a boy. Whatever bad things happen in the village, there are floods, the weather gets extreme, there's no food. A young person is chosen and sent away to a library. He is going to be the librarian of this remote and sacred facility, an abandoned facility. It becomes a kind of ritual sacrifice. The story begins with a young boy that was chosen to send to this library. What he has seen, who he encountered with, and what happened in this library exactly. It has this really weird urban legend fair story element in it. The village survives because someone was sent away. Knowledge is preserved because someone disappeared. People are guarding something that they don't know where it came from or how to use it. If it was any other writer, it could be a magical story, a mystery story, but maybe a fantasy. But Kitayama, that's what I love about him. He put a more unsettling ground of this story. He gave everything a real answer, explanation. He imagined this story as a point where the math and technology becomes together. Everything happened in this story has facts and based, which makes it 10 times worse, because it reflects how humanity changed the world around us. And at the end of the story, it was revealed that there was absolutely no myth here, no fairy tales. Everything is based on facts and reality. I'm not going to tell you what happened, but I can tell you that the answer was revealed with one logo and one name. And then everything started to make sense. That was a crazy experience to read, and it's also one of the reasons I think Kitayama deserves more English language attention. There's a long tradition in English writing culture that blends spectacular things with emotional and real questions in order to ask something philosophical. Imagine Borges or Ted Chiang. Some of their works, beneath this spectacular premise, they ask questions that are really hard to answer. What is memory? What is knowledge? What does it mean to live in a world that you don't even understand? How would your actions affect the world? Kitayama's mystery can operate in a similar space, except he brings the discipline of the Japanese honkaku mystery and blends with real, raw, emotional telling. And then the stories in this book also expand his range of storytelling. The voice calling from the valley begin with a atmosphere that's like a ghost story. There was this forbidden valley in this small village. The idea of the dead, a girl trying to do something extremely dangerous. It talked about an alley that could bring the dead back to life as long as you do not look back when you are walking out of the alley, which sound exactly like the Greek myth of Orpheus. One day, a girl decided to walk in the valley. She came back again the next day and the next day. Who was she trying to find there? Was she dead? What happened in the valley? Those few sentences intrigued me immediately, and then I sat down and read this book. The last story in this work, Piano Sonata for the Upside Down Girl, it's based on a Beethoven music. A boy got a music sheet and said, at the beginning of the music sheet, it said, "Do not play this music." One day, out of curiosity, of course, he sat down and played the music. Time stopped when he was playing this music. And I'm not going to tell you what happened later. But I never thought I would want to weep reading a detective mystery story. But at the end of this story, I was touched by the raw, the energy, and the emotions that hidden, the nostalgic, the bittersweet of adolescence. I was touched by all of these non-rational elements in this work. I also think another really important reason that I want to do this video is I also think his work challenges a very narrow idea of what Japanese mystery fictions could look like in the world. English readers often receive Japanese crime fiction through a certain catalogs. Lockroom mystery, serial killer, social thriller, the classic puzzle mystery. Of course, they're wonderful. If you watched any videos from this channel, you will know that I'm a huge fan. Those are wonderful traditions, but that were not the whole landscape. Kitayama represents a more surreal, fantastical, modern, conceptual, experimental layer of this world. He has a playful, bizarre, extremely weird, bizarre, brutal way of telling these stories. He told it in an extremely innovative and creative way. And I think he is a reminder that mystery fictions can also be a laboratory. And that's one of the biggest reasons I want to talk about him today. That's all for today's video. Thank you for watching. I realized I've only read like 20-something book for the first half of this year. And since we have done moving now, I'll try harder. And see you next time. Thank you for watching. I hope you are somehow interested in finding some of his works. Please let me know in comment section. See you next time. Bye.